So raise your hand if you have trouble using context. Okay.
If you didn't raise your hand, you're lying.
Almost everyone here. Right. So context is an idea borrowed from GTD, from David Allen. Right. So in a traditional to-do list, you have a couple items on the list, and then that's it. Right. You just write down one or two words, and you just say this needs to be done today. Right. So what a context does, it describes how or where you will get that task done. Right? So it gives you an extra perspective to know how you will get something done. Or another way to put it is what conditions need to be true in order for this to be done. So for example, if I need to make a phone call, you can have a task that says call John, but obviously you would need a certain tool for that, which is your phone. So what context allow you to do is group tasks by their characteristics as well. Right? So you can batch tasks together and do them in one swoop. So if you have to make 5 phone calls, rather than going through all your projects and trying to figure out which people do I need to call, you go into context view in OmniFocus and then go to your phone contacts, and then you can see right away which people you can call.
Yeah, and I think what's happened over time is there's been a lot of crossover. Well, there's my phone at work and my phone at home. My cell phone is with me at work, and my home phone's there, and all of a sudden you don't know which phone to put in your context, and you want to drink, and you go to the bar like I usually do. So one of these things where over time there is no perfect way. I mean, like I will tell you, and you'll especially see it when I start talking about how I use them specifically, and Tan starts talking about how he uses them specifically. We use them wildly differently. But it works for me, his version works for him, and to me when it comes down to it is context, specifically in OmniFocus, the context field in OmniFocus, there's literally no right way to do it. There's maybe some best practices, some good starting points, but at the end of the day, it's either something that is being effective for you or not being effective for you, and basically the end of the day is to, at least as much as I hate to admit this, get to the point where I can create a task and not want to go to the bar, although I like excuses to do that. And then let's maybe touch on some of the challenges and some of the obvious stuff. First, one for me is GTD versus modern tools, and we've sort of touched on this a little bit. I love David Allen's Getting Things Done. I use a lot of the aspects of David Allen's Getting Things Done, but the book was written in 2001. It's funny, Mike Vardy, who's somewhere out here, did an interview with him, and they were talking, this was right before even the iPad came out. iOS just had come out, and it's so vastly different now. You used to have maybe 2 computers, maybe a smartphone that didn't do all that much. There wasn't so much crossover. Now, I'm pretty much online everywhere. I pretty much can do email everywhere. I pretty much can make a phone call everywhere. And there's so much crossover now that traditional, easy to take on a piece of paper list has become a nightmare of a way to spend your day. Yeah. Are you finding that, or is that just me?
No, it's totally true. When you have to consider that GTD was published, in the early 2001, so that's the time when we didn't have smartphones. Right? And so we had a lot of different tools. So context gave us a way to differentiate tasks. But right now, because we're constantly online, right now we have a smartphone. An iPhone can do like 10 different things. So you don't have all these 10 different tools right now. Now you have just one tool that can do all of these things that a computer can do. So why would you have a context called Mac? Or why would you have a context called computer, or online or offline, when you're online all the time anyway? Almost everyone here has a data connection, right? Raise your hand if you do. Right. So you already know that if you assign a context called online, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't feel right because you feel like you're doing too much stuff just to assign something because this system says you need to assign a context. And so that's why these contexts that are introduced back then are sort of outdated now. And we'll just get into that and how you can sort of resolve that.
Yeah, and on top of that, they have really flowered. I mean, you look back at Getting Things Done, it does really, talk on what we've talked about. Here's your phone, here's your computer. There are ones now like energy levels. There are ones like state of mind, amount of focus you need. And all of a sudden, it just kind of blows out. The other problem, too, is single tasks often have multiple contexts. On the flip side, specifically OmniFocus, and this is one thing where some people like this, some people don't, only allow for one context per task instead of multiple tagging, at least at the moment. Maybe tonight we'll know differently, I have no idea. But the thing is, for me, I like that limitation. It forces me to lock in and choose the most important thing that I need, the most important context for that task, and to get it done as quickly as possible. I mean, do you how have you been dealing with that, on the kind of, let's hold off on, I'm sorry, I'm completely blowing that now. The other thing too that I find is, like I said, that context field matters, but that doesn't mean there's not more context in the actual task that you create. I'll definitely talk about this a little bit more when I get into mine, and maybe, unless you have anything to say on that, you can get into how you're really doing it.
No, yeah, let's get into it.
So geek out. Tell them.
So I'll just give you my story first and how I got into this, and so you can sort of see how I use it. So 4 or 5 years ago, I read GTD. Loved it. I'm a systems guy. I think in components. I'm a really a big geek, right? I'm a productivity nerd.
I'll vouch.
Yes. So I like to break stuff down into smaller components and then figure out how does this thing work together in a whole system. Right, so GTD was perfect for me because I can break everything down by project, by context, and if you get creative enough, you can sort of modify that system to make it your own. Right, so the traditional contexts and projects were fine as a starting point, and when you use OmniFocus for the first time, it will predefine your context already. And a lot of people use that, which is fine when you first start off, and especially if you're reading GTD along. When you're using OmniFocus, it's great because it will give you a good starting point. But as you get busier, as you evolve, as your systems become bigger and better, then you sort of start to outgrow that system. And that's sort of the point where I was, this is not working for me. I don't understand why I'm using computer. I don't understand why I'm using online and offline because I have a 4G connection all the time with me. It doesn't make any sense. The only time I'm offline is when I'm on a plane, and that's when I want to sleep. Right? So it doesn't make any sense to have these contexts.
Do you put that in your task list? Is that?
Yes. If I'm on a plane, you will not see me working. I'm sleeping. So I'll be that weird guy next to you.
A red do task, and you jump in and it's sleep.
So yeah, these contexts just didn't make any sense anymore. So I was going through a journey of trying to figure out what does work for me. And so one thing you'll start to notice today is that there's no one solution for this. Right? We can give you a bunch of contexts that you can use that are really useful, but everyone else here will have a different set of contexts. If you ask me what my contexts are, if you ask Schechter, if you ask this lady, this guy, everyone will give a different answer. Right? So you really have to make it your own, but there's a foundation level that you can use, and we'll talk about that as well. So when I first started, I said, you know what, I'm going to throw everything away and start from scratch. Right? So I'm going to figure out what my contexts are. And I was talking to my buddy Aaron, who I run Asian efficiency with, and we're just brainstorming okay, how do we think? How do we get stuff done? What are the conditions? What are the restraints in our lives? Right? So, because if you think in context, you can say to yourself, what's the condition that needs to be true in order for me to get this done? Or what are some of the restraints for me to get stuff done? Right, so if I'm at the grocery store, obviously I can't do stuff on my computer because I'm at the grocery store. Right? So there's a physical context there that I can use. Right? So there's maybe a context called errands. Right? So that's the starting point. Okay. Second thing I know about myself is that I'm online 24/7. So I know that a context called online doesn't make any sense for me. Right? So I can scrap that. So then I started thinking, okay, I started reading a lot of stuff about Tony Schwartz. I don't know if anyone knows him. Raise your hand if you do. Okay, so he talks a lot about energy levels and how you manage yourself to get stuff done. Because when you think about it, if you are tired, there's no way you get stuff done. You'll be more likely to procrastinate, you'll stop working, and you're just really unfocused, right? So I was thinking, yeah, I can totally identify with that because if I'm high energy, which is in the morning, then I know I should be focusing on my most important stuff. And later in the day, when I'm sort of fatigued and tired, I can focus on the little things. So how can I structure my OmniFocus setup around that idea? So that's when I started implementing energy levels. So if I can assign a task that requires a lot of energy, then I know when it's 8 a.m. and I'm hardcore, hardcore on my work, I can go into OmniFocus and say, show me all the tasks that are assigned with high energy level. So I can go in there and then see, okay, if I get all this stuff done today, my day is done, right? The rest of the day is like free time for me. Because if I get all my high energy stuff done, I can do whatever I want. So I started playing with high energy, concentration, low energy, and that started working really well for me over time. Because then when I was feeling like I want to procrastinate, I would just go to my context that says low energy, and all the tasks that are assigned with this context are stuff that doesn't require a lot of focus, doesn't have any due date, is stuff that I can do anytime. So for example, cleaning my desktop folder, for example, or rearranging folders in a specific folder, right? All these little things that you have to do at a certain time, but doesn't have any specific due date is perfect for this stuff. And so that way I could rearrange my tasks based on my mood and on my energy level, which was really, really useful for me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely going to start with my starting point. Has anyone here seen David Sparks' videos on how to use OmniFocus? And that was pretty much my entree into the app as a whole. You know, just getting into it, I didn't really know how to go about it, didn't really know how to best use it. I was another application that shan't be named user at the time that wasn't working for me, and came in with his starting point. I looked at basically what he provided as the starting point for context and started there. And just started using the app. And quickly found a couple of things. Obviously, a lot of the crossover we've talked about, but over time, I basically got it to a point where I knew how I wanted my devices, I knew how I wanted my energies. I don't use the energy level stuff. I tend to plan my day in the day. The biggest thing for me that I count on is the OmniFocus clipper and the quick entry screen. And I don't ever want to hesitate when creating a task and having to decide if my energy level is more important than the device I need to use it for me. I'm going to get confused very quickly because, well, I get confused very easily. I want to be able to get through quickly. And so over time, every once in a while, I would be using this thing, and I decided as part of my reviews to actually start reviewing the context. Okay, I've got this ridiculous hierarchy. I've got the people I work with in one list, and then I have a waiting for a list with those same people in there, and I've maybe created some perspectives that take advantage of those, but for the most part, nothing's really talking to itself. And what I quickly found was I had a lot more perspectives than I was actually using, and the view became fairly useless for me fairly quickly. So I just started boiling down, and eventually got to the point where, and this is where I'm at now, I only have two contexts. I only have work and home. I have a lot more aspects of my life. I have a lot more devices, obviously. Just because I got rid of my phone context doesn't mean I don't actually have a phone anymore. But what happened for me was contexts were something I needed to, at least the context field in OmniFocus was something I needed to be able to use. And when I get to work every day and open up my computer, it's powered by a perspective based on work. When I go to my laptop at night at home, it's powered by my home perspective, which draws from those two contexts. What I also found was the way I got around this so that I could actually, do work is naming my tasks really intentionally because, well, those are pretty much context. If I write in context work, email Bill about vacation days, I can search for Bill, or I can search for email, and all of those tasks will come to the surface. It's not a perfect system. Let's say I want to look for everything I have that's email. There could be the word email in the middle of a task and a note field of a different task. So it's a bit of a flawed system, but the one thing you'll find is you're dealing your own system, and maybe yours is perfect, I don't know, but they're all flawed systems with trade-offs. I mean, that's what you're trying to get to, is which trade-off works best for you. So for me now, when I go and I create a task, I name it really carefully, think about those contexts in there, and I don't use any symbols or anything like that to kind of cut those out. Like I don't do @email, so it's easier to search for that stuff. Just the same sort of thing. Email Bill, re-vacation days, context work, starting a due date if we need it, and I don't put in the times or anything like that. And that's really become what contexts are for me. It's a thing that powers perspectives. And it's helped me. I mean, again, I think in a moment we'll start poking holes at each other's methods, but just for fun, and then hopefully drag a few of you guys in and get to tell us what you're doing and tell us what we're doing wrong, because I could always use to hear what I'm doing wrong. But at the end of the day, like here's a good flaw in mine is something I want to show up in both the work and home perspective. There are ways to cheat this, but it's not perfect. I can either make a subcontext for each one that's anything and decide which one it goes into, or I can make a context that's anything and cheat some perspectives to include both. But in all reality, if I'm using the app naturally, if I'm going in by perspective on the iOS app, it doesn't work. So at the end of the day, I've just really prioritized around those two views, around those two mindsets for me, because home, which includes my family, my site, you know, any health stuff I'm trying to do, any stuff I need to do around the house, any work on anything I'm doing personally versus work where I'm really just prioritized on my job, they're essential. The other thing too, which is handy to have, is, I don't know if you guys have set this up, but OmniFocus makes it so you can set up keyboard shortcuts to jump through perspectives. So at the touch of one keyboard shortcut, I can magically go from work to home. And you know, that kind of lets me shift gears very quickly, very fluidly, and get what I need out of it. Also, if you don't have the head bar there, Command Option F to get the search box, very helpful, very useful. So you want to tell me why I'm wrong before they tell me why I'm wrong?
We'll get into that for sure. And what I want you to understand is that the underlying context or the underlying meaning is that you need to have a clear definition what a context means to you, right? If you know what that definition is for you, then setting up your context becomes fairly easy. Right? So for example, in his case, it's either work or home, and that's it. Right? In my case, it's what energy level do I have? And based on that definition, that's when I know what context I need to assign. Right? So for example, if I feel really tired, then I know I need to assign the low energy context. But if I'm feeling really focused, then I know that I'm going to assign the high energy context. And so if you know what your definition is, then it becomes so much easier to use context. Because if there's any vague or ambiguity in there, then it's so easy to screw it up. And then when you're going through your review and you're trying to assign which context do I need to assign here, then that friction point will almost make you think that, okay, what do I do here? And then, you know, what's the point of getting stuff done? Because you're actually spending more time managing stuff than actually getting things done, which is not what you want, right?
Yeah, I mean, not to pitch why I'm right, but, well, yeah, I could totally do that. But one of the things I like about my way is I rarely use the inbox. I mean, I drop things in immediately the way I set it up. I'm naming the task. I'm pretty much know whether it falls into work or literally anything else, which is my home context. And then I can put the start date and finish date in. So that review's sort of done up front. I don't want to create my task and then come back to it later and have an argument over myself. Is it a call or is it a low energy task? Because again, that just, to me, it multiplies and it just multiplies and multiplies and multiplies. I mean, I think you've done a good job boxing it in, you know?
Yeah, like, I want to preface that by saying that I work from home. I think that is a really important context.
Are you also on one computer? Or
yeah.
Okay, yeah, because that makes a huge difference. Like, I'm on two machines, so the work I'm usually doing on both of them is fundamentally different, which plays into how I use it.
So because I work from home and I'm like just behind my computer writing all day, you know, it's easy to implement, for example, in an energy context. But if you work in an office, you know, your boss doesn't care if you're tired, if you're high energy. You need to get stuff done, right? So in that case, an energy context is not so useful. But maybe at home it is, but in an office environment, it's not. So in an office,
if I said I'm going to do some low energy tasks this afternoon, that's not going to go over very well.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're like working from home, you do stuff for yourself. Energy context is great, and who here like works on their like by themselves or does freelancing? Okay, quite a bunch. So another context I want to introduce to you guys, especially, is the concept of roles and hit spaces. So this is a little bit more advanced, and this is really useful if you're wearing a lot of different hats. So for example, one of the things that I discovered is that, you know, okay, I'm a blogger, and when I write, I need to do a lot of different things, right? I need to incorporate. I need to write stuff. I need to do research. I have to wear all these different hats, right? So how can I best maximize my time knowing that I have to do all these different things while it won't affect my creativity? Because if I'm writing, I don't want to be thinking about, you know, where should I incorporate? What legal stuff do I need to do? I just want to write and let it flow, right? So what I came up with is different roles and hit spaces. So an example of a hit space is creativity. If I'm feeling creative, then I can just go through my creativity context and then go see what some of the tasks that require a lot of creativity, so I can focus on that. If I'm wearing a specific role, so for example, I am the coder or the programmer, I can go in there and see all the tasks where I can feel like, you know what, I should be programming today.
It's interesting. I don't do, like for me, like I couldn't do that in context. For me, that's all about like the project hierarchy, you know, where I have, let's just take that home context. When I'm at home, I'm really looking at family, I'm really looking at the site, I'm really looking at, you know, podcasts, I'm really looking at just, you know, the stuff I want to do for me. And because I couldn't, again, like, to me, anything that complicates it more makes it harder to use. You know, so now it's roles, devices, energy levels. I guess I lose it quick. Should we turn it over, see if anyone has questions or wants to tell us why we're wrong? Anyone want to tell me why I'm wrong? Please? Come on, someone here has to have an... All right, I got one.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you why you're wrong.
Fine. Then I'm right. Okay, we're good.
But I'd love to get your take on one of the things that I've struggled with around context is this idea of being reactive to your tasks versus proactive about them. And I always felt like context, especially in GTD, is very reactive. It's like, and in some of the book too, it's this funny, like, if you find yourself with your phone in your car, and it's like, and then you pull out a piece of paper that says phone and car, and like, great, I'll do that. But because we all kind of usually work in one space, and you can choose what you do more often than not. I've started setting up contexts very proactively. So I still do have online, offline processing, and I will just schedule, and at the beginning of the day, I'll kind of look at those contexts and see what I kind of have in them, prioritize them, use the flag such that I'm like, oh, right, that actually needs to get done today, or that's pretty important today. And then I'll set aside, I need like a 3-hour block of time for offline tasks. And for me, offline is actually a restriction that I just place on myself, knowing that like I can be online, but I'm going to proactively put myself offline because I know that actually it's going to be better for me. So anyways, this idea of like, I don't know if you guys have thoughts about this proactive versus reactive.
I definitely do. I mean, I would tell you the first thing for me is start and due dates are huge on this because it lets me keep things out of my line of sight until I need them, and also lets me, when used, especially due dates, if used super selectively, bring things immediately to my focus. You know, I don't have any badges or flags on either my phone or my computer except for one, due or coming due tasks on OmniFocus, so that when I see that red, my brain actually responds to that. And it's a little bit more on the reactive side, but I'm not using it in a panic. I'm using it in a way to kind of bring it to the surface for me. That also, when I go to my tasks in the morning, because so much stuff has start dates that I'm not seeing, I can really be proactive about which tasks I place. I think you and I, in this sense, probably work very much alike. Every morning I sit down, I go through my tasks at work, in that work context, and I look over it and I plot my day out so that it's the same sort of thing. I may not focus exactly on the details, like I may just say I want to work on this, you know, particular project for this block of time and not pick the 3 tasks I'm going to do on it. But same sort of thing, I know at that time I'm doing that. I may even, you know, sometimes if I have a really crazy week coming up, I'll use that and kind of go through it and just see it. The idea of context as proactive probably would be something you're better to talk to. For me, I think there are other tools within OmniFocus that let you bring that to the surface more.
Right. So yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and I think it comes down to how you use OmniFocus by itself. Because if you think about being proactive and reactive means that you're adhering to whatever OmniFocus says to you, right? Whereas if you're being proactive, you're trying to tell OmniFocus, this is the stuff I want to do today, right? So the way I see it is, the way I try to be proactive about it is whenever I start my day, I look at all the things that are available, and then I select the things that I need to work on. So in that case, it doesn't really matter to me what context that is, because if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. So I just select the things that I want to work on and focus on that. If that requires for me to be offline, so be it, I'll be offline. But if I have to be at a coffee shop or at the grocery store to do that, so be it, I'll be there. Right? So I don't really look in terms of context in that sense, because I'll just select the things that I need to do, and I'll just make it work, you know, depending what the context will be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think reviews can go a long way on that too. You know, every Friday I usually sit down, look over everything that has, you know, things coming up or things planned for. I don't go too deep into it. I do that really at the monthly, where I look at everything that maybe doesn't have actions to it. But that gives me a pretty good sense of what I may want to do when I hit my desk Monday. As for home, I use those project folders I told you about to really dive down into each area and try to look at it. And again, just say, okay, what do I really want to focus on today and try to do? And even just something as stupid at the end of the day of writing down what you did and maybe you want to do better tomorrow is a good way to get ahead of being proactive.
Who here has problems with prioritizing? Okay.
And the rest of you are lying. But
So has anyone found a good solution to prioritize their tasks in OmniFocus? Nobody? Okay, I'm gonna.
The flags really, but flags really are just like a on-off state. So
Yeah.
But in some ways, I kind of like David Allen's view on that. That priority actually is kind of a silly idea. That because you can get like you're saying with the better mess, it can multiply so quickly. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you've got 1A. Then you got 1A star because that's actually more important. Like it becomes is it a priority or is it not a priority? Not. So I actually think flags is really good for that.
yeah, I think it's always a matter of trying to figure out. And I think this tends to be more at first, and then you sort of scale back, or at least the way I did it is to give yourself enough scaffolding so that you can kind of splice your work the way you want to splice it. But as you go, figure out what am I really using and which of all those things are driving me to do work. Like if due dates aren't causing you to do the thing, it's probably not the right thing. If flagging things isn't helping you actually do the thing, the tool's only going to be as good as your willingness to listen to it, which is why I'm super stubborn about due dates. Like, I want to actually, when I see that red, I want to be like, oh crap, I need to make time and space for this.
So I have a different take on prioritizing.
Fine, tell me why I'm wrong.
So I'm a big fan of Brian Tracy. I don't know if anyone knows him. Like, Eat That Frog was like a game changer for me. So one of the methods he introduced to me was called the ABC method. So you
Always be closing, isn't that Alec Baldwin?
Well, in this case, you prioritize your task by A, B, and C. So your A tasks are stuff that you have to get done today. If that doesn't happen, the world ends. Right? So your B tasks are stuff that you can do today. Would be nice to finish, but it can only be done after your A tasks are done. And then your C tasks are stuff that you can do anytime you want. Right? It would be nice. I'll get
and what's a really good one for that too, just if you're looking for another option, or at least the one that I count on, and I apologize that it's not OmniFocus, is I love David Say's Emergent Task Planner and really live for that. And it gives you David Say, S-E-A-H, the Emergent Task Planner, ETP. And that does here are the 3 things, and then it's 3 more things, and even on top of that says are you really sure you're going to be able to do more than those 3 things, which it's a pretty good gut check. Also gives you set up your day on the side, capture notes as the day goes on, or even just put little tasks down there. For me, I find that gives me a very reasonable amount of space. I also use the small little 4x6 size ones so that I can only actually put so much on it. Because I tend to sometimes be the person who writes everything on, does 3 things, and then moves it all to the next day, which turns out was a terrible way to work. Anyone else? Questions? Come on, guys. This is only going to be, at this point, as good as you guys.
Hello. Sorry. My name is Ivan from Los Angeles.
Hi, Ivan.
Hello. Thanks for letting me in.
I didn't have any say in the matter.
Oh, okay. For me, for priority, I tried the ABCD thing, but I felt like I kept rewriting my list. So I use my calendar as my sort of sacred ground and territory. And as I'm doing a review, which usually happens 3 or 4 times a year, my weekly review, at that time, or when things come in and I'm processing, I collect. It's easy for me to collect. Sometimes there's not enough time to process, but when I'm processing, I go, oh, I have to get this done. Let me put this on my calendar for Tuesday, from this time to that time. And then I use the alarms or the due dates within OmniFocus for things that are important, but not as important as the things that are on the calendar. So those are the ticklers, and I find I don't ever use the flags at all because they just sit there. I never look at them again.
Yeah, I mean, you can set up a perspective for the flags, but I was the same as you. I mean, I haven't really gone to the calendar on that just because I'm pretty stubborn about specific thing I have to do at a specific time on the calendar versus specific thing I need to do on a specific date, being a due date in OmniFocus. But I mean, same sort of thing that I do that on the Emergent Task Planner. I write in the day, 2 to 3 o'clock, I want to spend my time doing that. But look, again, same sort of thing. Whatever actually gets you to do the work is a positive thing.
Yeah, like what your holistic approach is, if that works for you, great, ride that. If you try stuff that we talked about today, it didn't work for you, try something else, right?
Yeah, no, it's I was saying it to Derek and Chris earlier, who this is actually one of the few times I've ever seen a marketing slogan actually be apt, and this app is something else to everybody. It's funny. There's a really good podcast, Generational, with Gabe Weatherhead, and they were talking. He had, I think, Jeff Huntsberger over, and they were talking about OmniFocus, and Jeff was like, what I love about OmniFocus is it's so flexible, and Gabe, being Gabe, starts complaining that I think it's so rigid. But the honest answer is it's right in between those two things. It's really flexible in which rigidity you choose. And like getting to a point where this is how you use it and you are super stubborn about that, like if Tan tried to explain to me why I'm wrong, which he loves doing, and tried to get me to use his way and change his mind, I am at this point almost religious about the way I use it because it actually makes me do work. And like that should be the biggest question at the end of the day is this thing I'm doing making me do work? If that's putting on your calendar, great. If that's flags, great. Due dates, great. Doesn't matter. As long as at the end of the day, those boxes actually got checked and, those boxes actually meant something. I think
Question.
Sure.
So my question is agenda and waiting fors, right? So you mentioned it when you were doing your introduction, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
That trying to come up with a system for that. Do you guys have any tricks, hacks? How are you doing it in your kind of simplified version, and then how are you doing it as well?
Yeah, for me, in the simplified version, I used to have the context of waiting for and the context of people I would logically be waiting for and would put it in there and give it that context and check that context regularly. Now I actually just, like I said, create the task at work or home. If I'm waiting on my wife for something, it's home. If I'm waiting on, a coworker, it's that. Waiting for blank with that person. That way I can search by that person's name. I can search by waiting for, and I tend to check that once a day and just make sure that there's nothing in there that I need to follow up on. I also, again, really count on start dates to not have a million things that I'm staring at. So if I create a waiting for on something that probably is going to take a week, just knock in a starting date of a week. It comes up when I look at the work context in the morning. I'll see that waiting for and put it on my list.
Yeah, so we'll get to you. I have a different approach to that.
I think we have one last. I think we're done after this.
Okay.
we
So
got time.
I have a people context and a waiting context, and they mirror each other. So the people context has a lot of subcontext. So for example, it has my brother, my mom, Aaron, my friend, and other people that I work with. And then the waiting context is a reflection of that. So it's like waiting, my brother, mom, Aaron. Right? So if I'm working with a team, it will have a team context as well, both in the people and both in the waiting. So what I do is I create a perspective that shows both the people context and the waiting for context. So whenever, for example, I'm talking to Aaron, it will show me all the tasks that are assigned the people Aaron context and the waiting Aaron context. So whenever I talk to him on the phone or on Skype or wherever, I just pull up this perspective and it will show me exactly, okay, here are the things I need to talk to you about, and here are the things that I'm waiting for from you. So hopefully that will help.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
I pretty much get the same thing on using the names in line. Like if it's Macy in my office, I'm meeting with her, I just type in a search Macy, I get anything that would have her name in it. And again, like sometimes like if it's a Bill, could be Bill this for that and build stuff, but I find it pretty simply. Do we have time for the one more? Okay.
You just started to answer this, but if you only have those two contexts, I was wondering how else do you use your phrases or your perspectives in order to be able to work with that only two contexts?
I mean, this has to do with me just being weird. I can be either incredibly sloppy or incredibly rigid and not really all that great in between. So I've gotten very religious about how I name files, how I name tasks. So just by being super consistent, like waiting for this from that, and that context, that framework is always there. Sometimes like for ones where I know I'm gonna be sloppy, I'll even use text expander snippets to make sure they fall into place, because again, I'm weird. And just by being super religious about that, I know when I need to look at waiting for what to type. I know when to do it. Like, you can actually create perspectives from specific searches. Like you can have a search that has the word email in there, but even for me, just to quickly hit, Command Option F, get the search box and type an email, that muscle memory is a lot faster for me. Did that answer? Or? All right, I think that is it.
We'll be around today, so if you have any questions.
If you want to tell me why I'm wrong, I'm here.
I want to share everything I have on my phone here, my setup, so if you have any questions, let me know. I'll be willing to share.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.